Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to Dominate Fishing. I'm Dan Meyer, and in today's short video we're going to talk about some of my best crappie lures for catching fall crappies. The fall is a great time to catch crappies. Crappies get really aggressive and it's really fun to catch them. So we're going to talk about some of the lures that work the best for me, because there's nothing better than getting on a really good crappie bite where you're just pulling fish in one right after another, which happens in the fall. And you know, some days it's really going to make a difference what lure you're using, how you're fishing it. So that's what we're going to talk about in this video. So just to start out with, I just want to say, a lot of guys, when you get into the fall, they fish with live bait. They use minnows, and for good reason. Minnows work really well in the fall. And in the fall, with the cooler temperatures, you can keep them alive. So, you know, minnows are a great option. But in this video, we're going to talk about my top artificial baits. So we're going to start out with my absolute favorite bait for fishing, well, anytime I can fish it, and that is the Rapala Jigging Wrap. I love using jigging wraps. I just did really well yesterday, actually, on jigging wraps. And this is actually the one I was using. It's still tied onto my rod. Jigging wraps work really well. So what happens in the fall, a lot of the crappies move into deeper water. And you know, depending where you are in the country, it's probably hasn't quite started yet. You can get on that summer pattern with those deeper fish, but the real fall pattern has not started yet, but it's going to be starting soon. The further north you are, the quicker it's coming. Like where I live, looking into next week, we got some really cold temperatures coming. That's probably going to start pushing some of these crappies in deep water. So when you're fishing deep water, the jigging wrap works really well because it gets down there fast and you can control it. So I'm going to do another video that we're just specifically going to talk about jigging wraps. We're going to be talking about size, color, shapes. I'll link that in the top when it comes. But I'm also going to link a video right up here of a video I shot before where we're just really hammering on crappies on jigging wraps, so you can see how I do it. So definitely check that video out. You know, pause this, watch that one, or come back and watch that one. And you really see how I work it, because jigging wraps, I catch a ton of crappies on jigging wraps. But just really quickly on how to fish it, the first thing you want to keep in mind is what happens is you're going to take this jigging wrap and you're going to snap your rod tip. When you snap the rod tip with the jigging wrap, it's going to cause the bait to jump up in all erratic different directions. Every time you snap it, it's going to jump, and it's going to jump in a different direction. And what it's essentially going to end up doing is making big circles, which is going to put twists in your line. So you want to have a barrel swivel attached to a leader, so that way when the jigging wrap's doing circles and twisting your line, it's swiveling on the barrel and it doesn't put line twists in your main line. Because otherwise, I've done it with no barrel swivel, it'll put big twists in your line, and eventually your line will all just coil up because the twists in it are so bad. So I'm going to show you real quick how to fish this jigging wrap in the water. Alright, so I moved up into some shallower water so you can see this bait. But when you can see, I'm hopping it on the bottom, and as I'm doing it, it's jerking in all different directions. I hope that's really clear. So that's what this bait is going to look like underwater. Now, when I just do, you can see my bait just sitting there. When I do one jerk, it shoots up, comes right back to the same spot. Another jerk, shoots out, comes back to the same spot. Jerk, pops out, comes back to the same spot. You can see as I jerk it, if I stop jerking, it's going to come back to the same spot where it started. So what you're going to do with this jigging wrap is you're going to be in deep water, you're going to get over these schools of crappies, and you're just going to snap that rod, which causes it to shoot out to the side, and then you're just going to hold it there so it shoots out to the side and rolls back into the position, you know, where it started. Now what's going to happen is the crappies are going to come up and they're going to be looking at it, they're going to see it shoot out and roll back into the spot. With crappies, you don't want to do as big a snaps as you would with walleyes, because what it'll do is it'll snap it right out of their strike zone and they won't see it anymore, and they'll kind of lose interest. So you can do some big snaps to kind of catch crappies' attention, but then you want smaller snaps to be worked in with there. Sometimes they'll hit it with just the big erratic snaps. sometimes they want a smaller little movement to get them to hit. So you gotta just kind of mix it up, put in a little bit, you know, different actions, different size snaps, and then pause on the bottom for a varying, you know, sometimes a second, sometimes a half second, sometimes 2 seconds. Just kind of change it up and see what the crappies want to hit. All right, so a second type of lure that really works well is plastics. Now, plastics, everyone thinks, you know, spring, summer, they work great. They also work good in the fall. Now, especially early fall, because early fall, the crappies, they are really aggressive a lot of times. You know, they'll smoke that jigging wrap. They'll also just smoke plastics. The one thing about plastics is a lot of ways you fish them. You know, it's easier to fish them in shallow water. So what I do when I'm fishing deeper water with plastics, and we're gonna do a different video just on plastics, but the one I wanna highlight today is one that works really well for me in the fall, and that's the pink tube jig. You know, I've got a bunch of tube jigs here. There's pink. I've got, you know, chartreuse and black. I've got just plain chartreuse, all different colors of tube jigs, because tube jigs work really well in the fall, just like the summer. But when you fish them, I still like to fish them, you know, with a smaller jig head on it, because I don't want, crappies don't want to always hit those big jig heads. But you need to be able to get down in deep water where they're at. So here I have the 32nd ounce jig head on still. So what I do is I put a heavy split shot about a foot above the bait. So I think this is if I'm not mistaken, this is a 1/4 ounce split shot. And I've got it a foot above my 32nd ounce jig with my tube. That way, when I'm in that deep water, I can get my bait down to where the fish are. A lot of times they're gonna be moving around, either drifting or, you know, just using your electric motor. And as you move, if you've got just a light jig, it's gonna start raising that bait up in the water column out of the strike zone. So you want a heavy split shot. You might even need 2, you might even need 3 to keep your bait as close to vertical as you can. So that's how, if you're gonna fish any type of plastic in the fall, I like to use a heavy split shot just to get that bait down there, because you're usually gonna be fishing deeper water. So a third type of bait that I like to use in the fall is hair jigs or feather jigs. So here's a feather jig. This is a 64th ounce. It's really small. So again, if I'm fishing this bait, I'm gonna use those big split shots to make sure I can get down there to where the fish are at. Now I'm gonna fish either a hair jig or a feather jig. A lot of times, especially if it's a feather jig like this one, I'm gonna tip this with either a wax worm, which is like a fly larva, it's like a maggot. As soon as I can get those, you can't get them all summer. Usually once you get towards the fall, bait shops start carrying them. So I'll tip it with a wax worm, or I'll tip it with a minnow. Some type of live bait. If I'm using a marabou hair jig, which work really well in the fall, you can tip those, but a lot of times you don't have to tip the marabou hair, because that real fine marabou hair, it's just gonna kind of, as it's moving through the water, kind of does this, and that action just brings those fish in and gets the hit. I like pink marabou hair. Again, I'm gonna use those big split shots to get that bait down into that deep water to get those crappies to bite. All right, so a final style of lure that I like to use for these fall crappies is these Cubby mini mites. Looks just like this. And earlier in the fall, the crappies are really aggressive. You can get away with using a lot of different plastics. When you get into late fall, you're getting closer to ice up, the crappies, they're a little less aggressive a lot of times. That's when you're really gonna smoke them on that live bait. Or what I find is that's when the smaller plastics like the Cubby get a few more hits. You also, at that time, can use ice fishing lures. You're just gonna need to use those big split shots again to get them down quick in that deep water when you're in the boat. But these Cubby mini mites, these will work good all fall long. You'll catch a ton of fish on them. Put those big split shots on them, get them in that deep water. But the Cubby works really great. So if I was stocking up on crappie lures right now, I'd be getting some of those tube jigs, I'd be getting some Cubbies, I'd definitely be getting some jigging wraps, and then I'd also have some hair jigs with me. You know, if the bite's a little tough, hit them with those hair jigs. But just one of these lures is gonna work. So I'd stock up on all of them because we got some really good fishing coming up. So I hope this video helped you. If it did, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel, and I will see you guys in the next video.